This weekend, the news was abuzz about a cargo plane that landed in South Africa. And what is this all about? Well, I'm going to take a look at some of the news articles that I've been able to read, and I put together my story, my perspective, from the information out there that is available. I may be spot on, or I may be way off. And it may include some speculation, some conspiracy theory, maybe not. I try and give you my perspective on this story, and I hope you enjoy this one. Well, obviously, conspiracy theorists are going to love this one, and speculation stew will be brewing. A hulking Russian cargo plane, fresh off a detour through Iran and Tanzania, touches down in the dusty expanse of Upington Airport, of all places, in South Africa's Northern Cape. This isn't your average delivery run. The aircraft arrives bulging with cargo, unloads its mysterious haul, refuels at a spot near Johannesburg, and lifts off hours later, belly empty as a politician's promise. The operator, Abakan Air, a Russian firm slapped with US sanctions just last year for ferrying military gear to fuel Russia's war against Ukraine. And South Africa, they greenlit this whole thing with a permit, shrugging it off as routine. But why land in Upington, of all places, you might ask? The choice boils down to Upington's exceptional infrastructure tailored for oversized heavy lift operations, especially critical for a fully loaded military-grade freighter like the IL-76 in South Africa's arid high-altitude conditions. You see, Upington boasts a runway measuring a staggering 4,900 meters. It's one of the longest in the world and the longest one in Africa. Now, this length is essential for safe takeoffs and landings of massive cargo planes burdened with heavy payloads. You see, the IL-76, which is a Soviet-era behemoth designed for transporting tanks, helicopters, and up to 50 tons of cargo, requires at least 3,000 to 3,500 meters for takeoff when fully loaded in hot, thin air. Now, with Upington's extended runway, it provides a generous safety margin, so it reduces the risks to the plane being heavy laden when it was arriving from Tanzania after its prolonged stop in Iran. Now, in contrast, busier hubs like Johannesburg's OR Tambo International, with a runway of 3.5 kilometers, 3,500 meters, might not offer the same safety buffer with such operations without causing delays. Now, with all this technical stuff and what we know, all of this starts sounding like the setup for a Cold War thriller. But you're not far off. In a world still reeling from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this unassuming flight has ignited a firestorm of diplomatic finger-wagging, conspiracy whispers, and outright fury. Is it a brazen snub to Washington? Or perhaps just a harmless bit of trade between old BRICS buddies? Or something a bit shadier, like a covert arms drop-off or payoff in the shadows? As Pretoria walks a tightrope between Western economic lifelines and Eastern alliances, this incident exposes the cracks in South Africa's non-aligned foreign policy, and could cost it dearly on the global stage. So, what do we know? What are the facts? And what does it all mean for everyone from State Department to the street of the average South African? Flight tracking data doesn't lie, but it doesn't spill all the beans either. The plane in question was an Ilyushin Il-76, a Soviet-era workhorse built to replace the Antonov AN-12 and is notorious for hauling everything from grain to missiles. It originated in Iran, a nation already cozy with Moscow and under its own US sanctions for nuclear ambitions and proxy wars, before hopping to Tanzania and finally getting to South Africa. Upon landing in Upington, it was reportedly heavy loaded, offloading what South African officials describe as general cargo, civilian helicopters, and acrobatic planes. No return load meant it departed light, sparking immediate speculation. What exactly was offloaded? And where did it go? Now, South Africa's Department of Transport insists everything was above board. Abakan Air applied for an operator's permit on September the 9th, 2025 and got the nod 14 days later for a commercial flight. And they say, we were unaware of the blacklist, framing it as a simple oversight in a busy bureaucracy. But this isn't the first rodeo. Back in, I think it was April 2023, another sanctioned Russian IL-76 operated by Aviakon Zitotrans or something touched down at Waterkloof Air Force Base near Pretoria, ostensibly carrying diplomatic mail for the Russian embassy. That time, it was the same plane type, same sanctions vibe, and a suspiciously similar excuse. Coincidence? Or a pattern of Pretoria turning a blind eye? Social media obviously erupted with the usual mix of memes, conspiracy theories, wild speculation, and outrage. One user reckoned that the ANC thieves just got paid, implying a shady payout hidden in the hold. And then there were those who even defended it as standard logistics. You load at point A, unload at point B, leave empty if there is no return cargo. Someone even pointed out that a US military plane had parked in Johannesburg just weeks earlier without raising eyebrows. But a US military plane in the current Western climate isn't a problem. A Russian plane with a heavy cargo and being sanctioned is another story altogether. But perhaps it is a fair point. But the US bird wasn't blacklisted for war crimes. But what are these sanctions? What is the backstory? Why this plane is persona non grata in the West? To understand the drama, you need the dossier on Abakan Air. In June 2024, the US Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, hit the company with sanctions under Executive Order 14024, which targets entities propping up Russia's harmful foreign activities, which is a code for Ukraine invasion. But is there any real evidence? They say Abakan had been shuttling military equipment, including parts for helicopters and missiles, which was bolstering Russia's defense industrial base. So we are told. But is this a sanction on all military planes? Well, apparently no. We don't know. These aren't blanket bans on all Russian flights. They're surgical strikes on specific operators and aircraft tied to the military effort. The broader US sanctions web on Russian aviation is a beast. Since March 2022, the FAA has barred Russian planes from US airspace, and the Commerce Department revoked Russia's market economy status, choking exports of aircraft parts. By January 2025, OFAC had expanded to sanction anyone operating in Russia's key sectors, including aviation. So, what is their goal? They are trying to starve Moscow's war machine of logistics. But enforcement relies on allies like South Africa playing ball. And clearly, not everyone is. Now, there are those who would argue these sanctions are a double-edged sword. They hobble Russia, but ensnare neutral players, turning routine trade into a geopolitical minefield. One user even blasted the US for hypocrisy. We hate Russia, but somehow don't mind trading with them, even though they are at war with the Ukraine. It would seem that trade with Russia is booming. Energy deals, minerals, and now apparently helicopters. And why should the US dictates dictate who parks at Upington? As one defender put it, it's not blacklisted by South Africa. We are trading partners with Russia. Oh yes, we are a BRICS partner, remember? Plus, with AGOA expiring without renewal last month, Pretoria might feel it has nothing left to lose. South Africa, according to the ANC-controlled DIRCO, lobbied hard for its extension, AGOA. But incidents like this, they make renewal look like a pipe dream. Washington sees red, literally. The State Department is already dialing up the pressure with whispers of louder phone calls about AGOA fallout. And this isn't isolated either. US lawmakers have long accused Pretoria of cozying up to Moscow, citing joint military drills with Russia and China as evidence of deepening military relationship. Remember those drills which got cancelled during the G20 summit? And apparently US news headlines similar to blacklisted Russian cargo plane ignites US fury are now painting the landing as a secret slap to sanctions enforced. If the cargo was military gear disguised as civilian, it could trigger secondary sanctions on South African entities, freezing assets and scuttling deals. Is Russian state media saying anything? Silent so far, but expect spin about Western overreach if pressed. Iran, the flight's origin, might cheer it as a win for the access of autocrats. And in the global south, it's fuel for anti-imperialist fire. Why should African nations enforce Uncle Sam's grudges? But what about the what if? Here's where things get juicy and contradictory. South Africa swears ignorance of the blacklist. Yet this is the second such incident in 2 years, with the same plane model and sanctions flavor. How do you miss that in a simple Google search? And the cargo? Civilian helicopters and acrobatic planes. Sounds innocuous, but Abakan's track record screams military dual use. Now, internet sleuths speculate everything from arms smuggling to nuclear tech, echoing the infamous Lady R scandal. So what is the real contradiction? Well, it's Pretoria's neutrality rhetoric, which crumbles under scrutiny. Joint exercises with Russia? Check. Hosting sanctioned flights? Check. Yet they rail against the US imperialism while begging for AGOA scraps. This flight isn't just some small event. It's a sign of where US-South African relations are headed, especially since things have been kind of tense after AGOA. If this deal ends and AGOA cannot be revived, South Africa could lose billions in exports like textiles, cars, steel, and crops, costing thousands of jobs in a country already facing 33% or higher unemployment. And there could be an even broader fallout. Imagine if sanctions busting happens in BRICS heartland. Good luck enforcing them elsewhere. Then there's the flip side. It burnishes South Africa's credibility in the multipolar club. Russia and China applaud the defiance, potentially unlocking more investments in renewables or infrastructure. And Iran, a nod to shared anti-Western vibes. But at what cost? This is a giant middle finger to anyone who thinks we should be picking sides. And Pretoria is picking, just a drama-stirring one. In the end, the plane's empty departure leaves the biggest void. What was on board? We'll likely never know. Official opacity is the name of the game. But as tensions thicken like Karoo fog, one thing's clear. South Africa's favourite pastime of poking the global bear ensures the world's never bored. Just don't be surprised if the next call from DC isn't a polite chat, but a bill for the fallout. If you have any thoughts, please add them to the comment section, and thank you for watching. And if you found any value in this video, please do like, share and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.